Thank you, Craig. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to join you and have a chance to talk about Chicago and the broader region's sort of longer-run prospects with regard to job growth and also the health of our economy overall. I'm, ultimately very optimistic about our potential here in Chicago and in the region. Although at the same time, I think there is one important weakness that we must address, and I will come to that. But to start on this subject, when I think about Chicago or the region, where jobs are going to come from, where we're going to get growth, I step back and I think about, well, how do economies grow in general, wherever they are? And there are really three key ingredients to growth, to being a healthy economy, at a very fundamental level. The first is new ideas, innovation. Whether it's a new airplane, a new pharmaceutical product or medical device, a new software application, a new car. These are the things that are going to drive prosperity, new and better ideas. Companies that come up with new and better ideas will see their employment increase as they serve in growing markets, and companies that do not and are overtaken by other companies that are so doing will see their markets decrease and their employees will have to find new jobs. So if we want to grow, we need to come up with new ideas. That's the first thing. The second thing is physical capital. Workers are productive, they produce a lot and are very competitive and get paid more when they have good tools, machines, and infrastructure to work with. So physical capital being the stuff that we work with every day, from our computers to the containers that we ship across the world that allow us to be productive and meet our markets, meet our customers. So Chicago needs to accumulate physical capital, right? And that includes ultimately having good financial markets that are going to be able to help companies invest in those machines and tools. And it's also on the public sector's shoulders with regard to infrastructure, making sure we have healthy public infrastructure, whether it's for trade, getting your stuff from one place to another, and those kinds of aspects. So those are two important aspects: innovation and then physical capital. The last, and perhaps the most important, is human capital, right? By which I mean skills. And Anil was alluding to the importance of this. Companies looking for workers with the right set of skills. You need people who both understand and can utilize the best ideas, those innovative ideas, and can actually use the best tools, can use an MRI machine and a computer, and all of those things if we want to be productive, if we want to compete globally in the world. So Chicago is going to have to accumulate a lot of skills and have a system that accumulates and develops skills if we want to have a strong workforce and have strong companies and want to continue to grow and to lead. Therefore, I think if you step back and you think about it from a historical, long-run, global perspective, if Chicago and the region want to succeed, if we want to succeed as companies, we need three key ingredients. We have to innovate, we have to educate, and we have to build. Okay. So with that frame, let's think about how we're doing. Are we doing well or are we doing badly on those different measures? So start with innovation. The good news is that on innovation, well, we're actually pretty good at this. The U.S. economy is very good at this, and Chicago and the broader region is pretty good too. By one measure, take the Nobel Prize, take basic research, the basic ideas that unleash all sorts of potential in markets, whether it was the internet, penicillin once upon a time, or the NSF grant from the government that triggered Google for two guys at Stanford in graduate school. If you step back, take the Nobel Prize, the United States has less than 5% of the world's population, but we do about 65% of Nobel Prize winning research. Okay, so the U.S. has for a long time now completely dominated the world in the production of basic research insights. Okay, and that creates a strong foundation when those ideas can spill over into marketable products and into companies who are going to take them in new directions. Illinois is a home to a lot of that research. The University of Chicago is a very famous center of Nobel Prize winning research. Northwestern, Urbana downstate, and many of the other schools represented here, whether it's Nobel Prize winning or otherwise, are deeply involved in basic research from Ohio State, Madison, University of Michigan, and the broader region. These are all centers, deep centers, profound centers of research excellence. More directly, perhaps, if you look at the commercial side, we're also home to lots of very innovative companies. Whether it's, some of the most visible, of course, are the biggest, but whether it's Boeing or ITW or Abbott Labs or John Deere or Caterpillar, people who are producing new and better products all the time to meet market demand, to gain market share, and to grow employment. So in that sense, we look good. I think about 140 of the Fortune 500 companies in the United States are here, in addition to the middle market stuff. And I think 27 of those companies are actually headquartered in this city. So there's a lot of business, there's a lot of innovation. We're also, I think, historically, the land of Lincoln. Among Lincoln's many accomplishments for which he is so famous, one of the lesser known accomplishments, one that gets drowned out perhaps by all the other great things he did. Lincoln is the only U.S. president to hold a U.S. patent, any patent. He actually was an inventor, in addition to all of his other things that he did. He understood the importance of innovation. He once said famously, at least in circles of those who study patent law, he once said about the patent system that it adds the fuel of interest to the fire of genius. He understood that innovation is important and that there's public support for that is important, and he was an inventor himself. So perhaps there is something fundamentally in the air in Illinois and Chicago, in the U.S., even in the history, that suggests that we are actually a very fertile ground for innovation, for basic research, for new ideas, and for commercial success. That said, when it comes to innovation, I think there is a sense that Chicago is not necessarily mentioned in the same breath as we would talk about, say, Silicon Valley, or people used to talk about Route 128 around Boston, might talk about Kendall Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts now, which is a biotech center, or the Research Triangle in North Carolina. There's a lot of innovation here, but we're not necessarily seen as one of these kind of creative clusters. And that has to do more with startups and entrepreneurship, even though, of course, there's a lot of successful entrepreneurship. All these companies didn't come from nowhere. They came from starting off and starting from small and growing. And so we do see a lot of successful entrepreneurship here. But it's still not maybe quite at the level that we might aspire to if we want to be a center of new ideas that's going to keep growing new companies and growing innovative ideas and building new markets, growing into markets. About a year and a half ago, I was in Boulder, Colorado, which is has a kind of a creative cluster reputation these days, right around the University of Colorado there. They do a lot of web-based startups and development. And I was on a panel with a bunch of people. One of them was Brad Feld, who's a local well-known venture capitalist. And as part of the panel, he sort of trots out, here we are, I'm sitting in Boulder, Colorado. He trots out one of his recent success stories. It was the founder of a company which is called Next Big Sound, which does analytics online in the music business. And he starts talking about how great Boulder is. This is one of these panels that's sort of celebrating Boulder, Colorado. And he brings out this guy from Next Big Sound. And the guy from Next Big Sound is young. He's maybe 23. Starts telling the story of his company. And he's like, oh, right, we had this idea to start this idea in the music business. And oh, yeah, by the way, myself and my three co-founders were all Northwestern University grads. And I'm sitting there, clicking again, what? What was he saying? And he's like, yeah, well, we had this idea in class when we were at Northwestern, my own university. And well, we couldn't really seem to get it funded in Chicago, and we couldn't really develop it. But then we found this tech startup incubator here in Boulder, and they funded us, and look, now we're in Boulder. And isn't that great? Boulder's so great. Of course, and there's, on and on about how wonderful Boulder is. And of course, I'm hearing, why are these guys leaving Chicago, this giant city, this metropolis with all these resources, and going to the relatively small town of Boulder, Colorado, to have a startup company? What's going on there? Another version of that might be, more famously, Mark Andreessen, of course, who's the founder of the original designer of the first web browser, Mosaic, who would then go and start downstate at Urbana. He was in Urbana as a student, started it there. It was first created there, and then he went to Mountain View, California, to incorporate Netscape and go on to become a major player and venture capitalist himself, but unfortunately in Mountain View, California, not in Chicago or Illinois. People sometimes leave. People move around, of course. And I think the question is, what happened? What's going on in those stories, and how do we aspire to be better than we are, and to having that be a homegrown community? So I think the question there is, well, what's the secret sauce in making these creative clusters work? And if you look around the world at these kinds of things, many of which are in the U.S., part of it is universities and national labs often are kind of centerpieces of these clusters, providing a lot of high-skill individuals to work in them, and also providing some of the basic research insights that often trigger commercial products. So, if you look at, MIT, for example, is the center of the Kendall Square Biotech Cluster. Lots of biotech companies built buildings around us, circling MIT and Kendall Square. That's a big biotech cluster. Silicon Valley obviously benefits from Berkeley and Stanford. The research triangle in North Carolina is actually the triangle. The vertices of the triangle are 3 universities. That's why it's named that. Now, of course, we're good at that. I mean, we've got great engineering output in the city. We've got great universities, world-leading universities in the city. That is not a limitation. So in that sense, we're actually in good shape. But of course, that suggests that maybe, while universities are an important part of the mix, they're not sufficient. You need other inputs as well. So what else do you need if universities alone don't give it to you? The other thing you need is really thick markets of this kind of specialized inputs that can work for entrepreneurship. So thick markets of skills, thick markets of people with technical skills that can actually do various technical aspects of entrepreneurship, but also people with entrepreneurial experience, a lot of sort of the market knowledge and market skills that, the chance to fail and succeed and learn and trip over yourself and get better. And then, of course, so the sort of the managerial kind of skill I mean there. And then also financial ingredients. You obviously need a lot of early stage capital, for starting with, angels and venture capital, often into private equity as you grow and you aspire to become a middle market company, and kind of getting out of that early stage status once you've got a product that you're selling. And then all those specialized inputs have to come together, and you kind of need some kind of social network as well. It's why it's important to be geographically clustered. You need to be kind of in a place where people know each other. Oh, I can find someone who's got those technical skills that I need. I can find a manager for that. As I start to professionalize my management, I can find early stage capital. Building those social networks that are kind of the glue that stitch it together. So, when I look at Chicago and the region, I think, well, can we have that entrepreneurial cluster? Well, I think we can. And in fact, I think we're getting one. And I think it's remarkable how things are changing so quickly in this city, for example, around entrepreneurship. And it's very exciting. The data I've seen show that Illinois in the last 10 years has had a 145% increase in venture capital funding, which is 4 times the growth rate of the national average. So we've actually started to see a lot more early stage financing in the city, and that's an important ingredient, mixing in with the universities as well. Maybe most importantly, we've really begun to see literal clusters in the city building these networks. If you haven't had a chance to go down to 1871 over in the Merchandise Mart, which is our less than a year old entrepreneurial cluster, I recommend you go down there sometime. It's a very interesting experience. It's a big loft-like space in the Merchandise Mart on the 12th floor. Every little table is a different company. Company after company after company. They've got some intelligentsia coffee in the middle. You go down a hall, you've got technology transfer offices from universities. You've got angels and venture capitalists in there. You've got prize competitions. You've even got a classroom where people are being trained to program to do web-based software. You're creating all the specialized inputs and bringing them together in one place. I was there last night on a panel talking about the prospects of education technology and the prospects of Chicago leading in this new high-growth area of developing education technology. And whether we will or not, I'm not sure. But there were 200 entrepreneurs in a room, and we're all talking about it. I mean, the network was right in front of you. You've got finance. You've got people looking for companies to start. You've got people looking to work in startup companies. You've got programmers. The cluster is there. And that's not the only one. That's only one of the many exciting things that's been going on in Chicago in the last couple of years, developing this entrepreneurship type of cluster. At Northwestern, we've recently started, just in the last 8 months, a Kellogg Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative, which is really a launch pad for our MBA students and others to create businesses during their time at Kellogg and to start them right as they graduate or even before. We have these new courses at Northwestern called Newvention courses that are experiential entrepreneurship courses where teams of students from across the university, someone from the medical school, someone from the engineering school, someone from the MBA program, come together, are developing real ideas and trying to create companies. Those courses were recently rated by Inc. magazine as among the top 10 entrepreneurship courses in the United States. And this is just a small part. That's just one university. There's a lot going on in a lot of other places. So I'm actually very optimistic about this, and it's kind of exciting, to be honest. You know, when Next Big Sound, to go back to my story, go back to Boulder, I'm sitting there. When Next Big Sound left for Boulder, Colorado from Northwestern 3 or 4 years ago, they had to, in some sense. They felt that they had to. I don't think they would leave today. It's very clear to me what would happen today. They'd be in 1871. They'd have financing that's local. They'd be part of our community. And that I think is exciting, an exciting change. Okay, but let me back up from that, because that's I think actually an area for which I'm very optimistic, and I think it's going to be hopefully a big source of employment growth and the success and the status of Chicago as a global city, and our aspiration to become so in the next decade. But backing up, I think there is a real issue. It's the weak link, and it's going to come back to skills, something that Anil was touching on. And I think this is a challenge that we really just absolutely have to address. And the weak link is in skills, but it's not in our universities. Our universities are great. When you get to higher education, we're doing very well. The weak link comes before that. Community colleges have some challenges. We can do better there. There's some interesting initiatives going on trying to do that. But that's not where our weak link is either. I mean, everything can be improved. Our really weak link comes before that. It's really in primary and secondary education, right? The truth is that we are just far behind, both as a country and as a city in that country. And if you consider the facts, I mean, I think it's not a very optimistic picture. First, you know, if you look at international benchmarks on test scores, U.S. students take the 34 most developed countries as part of the OECD. U.S. students at age 15 score 17th out of 34 countries in science and 25th out of 34 in mathematics. Okay, so in terms of the quality of what our students know in some pretty important subjects at the age of 15, we don't look very good in international comparisons. If you look in Chicago, 40% of kids in their freshman year in public schools in Chicago do not graduate from high school. 40%. 40% do not even get a high school degree. Okay, that's not where the jobs are. That's not where the good jobs are. It's terrible. Over the last 40 years in the United States, the real wage of those with less than a high school degree has been falling. Okay, this is not our ticket to prosperity on the world stage. It's not our ticket to providing a workforce where companies can grow by finding workers who can really help them grow. All right? And we're not doing a good service for our markets, our potential. We're not doing a good service for those kids. So, you know, we have to do better. And to close, you know, how do I think we can do better? And we could, of course, have a very long conversation about the challenges in primary and secondary education in the United States or in Chicago. This is a subject that, of course, many people are engaged with and think about. I'm going to make just one observation, really, that I think frames both the challenge but also the opportunity in that space. And that is that if you look at most sectors or many sectors of the U.S. economy, we're highly innovative. Going back to what I said before, the U.S. is very, very good at innovation. Okay. If you look at very innovative sectors, something like pharmaceuticals or medical devices or aerospace, you know, 10 to 20% of revenues are pushed into research and development. Right? These are just a massive amount of resources are pushed into research and development. Take primary and secondary schooling in the U.S. by contrast. That's a $600 billion market annually, okay, is what's spent. Optimistic estimates suggest that maybe as much as 0.2% of that market is spent on research and development. It's about 1/200th probably the rate of what we'd see in sort of very innovative industries. Okay? We are not innovating. We're not doing well, and we're not necessarily innovating and learning how to do better. We're not trying new things as much as we should be. We've got to work to improve that. And so the challenge is, and the opportunity is, well, given how good this economy is, how good we are at innovation, how do we take that strength and apply it to what really is our signature weakness, which is K-12 skills? Okay? How do we get that strength positioned? How do we get it into the marketplace of K-12 education? And in that sphere, I think, you know, there's some reason to be optimistic, but we have a lot of work to do, obviously. And the reason to be somewhat optimistic is that we're starting to see a lot of new ideas, In sort of school design, we have charter schools and all those kinds of things, trying new models, which can help us figure out what might work the best, and hopefully that can grow. But we're also seeing a lot of innovation in tools in schooling, a lot of digital tools, a lot of online learning, a lot of potential to bring new kinds of engaged skill development exercises to kids. That I think, I'm never quite sure yet whether it's there, but there's certainly a lot of activity, and it's certainly getting there. I don't know if you've had the chance to go online and look at a Khan Academy lecture, for example. If you haven't, try it sometime. They're only 10 minutes long. That's an idea where you take an incredibly good lecturer and you flip the classroom. Instead of having the teacher lecturing to the kids in the school, how about you get one of the best lecturers there is lecturing to the kids in the school in short snippets, and then the teacher's time is spent working more personally with kids who need to sort of on exercises to discuss it and understand it. That's called a flipped model. There are these kinds of models to teaching where we might be able to kind of bring some of the best training into schools. There are ideas about how you do assessment, how you do software that's really engaging. How do I take kids, 40% of kids who are going into high school and not finishing, how do I take all that time they're spending in those schools, and instead of it being sort of a path to nothing or worse, an engaging experience? Are there software tools that are more, the gamification of education? There's lots of interesting innovation there. It keeps these kids engaged, keeps them learning, developing skills, keeps them, makes them want to be there, as opposed to tuning out or worse. That happens so much in so many cases. So, if Chicago and the broader region can figure out how to make, primary and secondary education an innovative environment, a place where it's easy for teachers, entrepreneurs, and others to come in and test new ideas and develop better ideas, then I think Chicago could become the center of something with national and global implications, but most importantly enhance our collective prospects of being a world-leading region in the decades to come. And I hope we'll all pitch in the ways that we can to make sure that is the reality that we experience going forward. So thank you very much.